Hey, this is Jamey with Stonemeyer Games, and in today's Sunday sit-down video, I am going to talk about my favorite set collection games, my top 10 favorite set collection games. This was a difficult video to make. I'm working on a game that might have a little bit of set collection in it, which most of my games, the games that I've designed, have not, that I can think of, have not really used it all that much. And so just to define it up front, or try to define it, because this is a tough one to define, um, a set collection game is a game where you are obviously collecting sets of something. Either you're trying to get a lot of the same thing, a lot of different things. You're trying to get, uh, yeah, it's usually that. It's usually like a lot of different things that pair together for some points, or a lot of the same thing that pair together for some points. They don't always result in points. Sometimes you collect a set and that means something in the game. You use that set of things to do something. But I've really tried to differentiate set collection from resource collection because they are very close if you are actually spending those sets of things on something else. Like in any game where you're gathering three different resources to spend them on one other to gain something. That feels very similar to set collection, but I'm not counting that in this category of set collection. You're not just collecting resources to spend. So an example of a game that's like kind of borderline is Pandemic. In Pandemic, you're collecting sets of the same type of card, either 4 or 5 of the same type of card, to cure a disease. So you are essentially collecting resources to do something, but they end up being sets. That's why there's this weird overlap there. So. You might think of games in the comments that you think are set collection. I may not, and that's okay. Feel free to mention your favorite, what you consider your favorite set collection games to be in the comments. Um, so yeah, let me jump right in. Actually, let me go do some honorable mentions because there are a few. There are a few in the honorable mention. I mentioned Pandemic. Splendor is another one that's really borderline. Stone Age is a game that I really love that does have what I definitely consider set collection in terms of there are these like artifacts that you're collecting, and if you have one artifact at the end of the game, you get 1 point. If you have 4 different artifacts, you get 16 points, and you can scale up those to a lot of different points. I think there are 10 total in there, so you can end up getting a ton of different points from having different sets of different artifacts in Stone Age. I didn't put that on the list because it's just like one small element of that game, but it was pretty close to making the list. At my number 10 is Above and Below, which is one again that I thought was kind of borderline, but it has such a cool mechanism that I really, really love it. In Above and Below, you are collecting resources that are worth points at the end of the game, but you're placing these resources on a row where the points per resource increase the further along that row you place them, but you have to place, every time you gain a new resource, you have to place it in the leftmost open space. So say, I can't remember the resources exactly in Above and Below, but say the first resource you collect is lettuce, and every lettuce is, say, worth 1 point because it's in the far left spot of the row. The next time you gain a new resource, or so you gain tomatoes. Tomatoes would go in the next slot over, and they might be worth 2 points each at the end of the game. If you get another lettuce, it doesn't go in the next empty space; it goes in the lettuce stack. And so it just ends up being this really satisfying mechanism of trying to like game the game a little bit so that you can get the most prominent resource, but you get it a little bit further down on that track. You don't get it right away at the beginning of the game. You get it later in the game, but you get a lot more points for each of them. Really, really clever mechanism. This is one that I think does belong in another game. Above and Below does it so well, but I'd love to see that mechanism in another game because it's really, really clever. So that's Above and Below, my number 10. My number 9 is Bohnanza. Bohnanza is a classic set collection game where you are actually turning in the sets of cards, but the more of each card that you have, depending on the type of bean that it is, it's worth more points. And certain beans are like harder to collect sets of them. So there might be a bean where you can turn it in if you have 1 bean, 3 beans, or 6 beans. And you might have another type of bean where you can turn it in if you have 1 bean, 2 bean, or 3 beans. So with Bohnanza, you're trying to decide like how far am I going to go before I decide to turn in these cards, and which cards are important to me because they're easier or more difficult to collect or trade for. Bohnanza is a lot of fun. It's my number 9 set collection game. My number 8 is Point Salad. This is one that could have been higher up in the list. I've only played it a few times, but I think it is really clever, and it's almost purely a set collection game. You're gaining points for collecting sets of the same vegetable, or for 3 different vegetables, you might get a certain number of points for 3 different vegetables, or you might get 2 points per vegetable. It's like every set collection mechanism wrapped up in one game, with where you're making a very simple choice between getting a set collection scoring card or getting the vegetables that you need to actually score those cards. So that's a really nice choice in the game. Really, really cool set collection game. If you love set collection, Point Salad distills it down to like the pure set collection mechanism. And there's one other game on the list, actually the next one, that does that same thing. And so that's Point Salad, my number 8. My number 7 is Archaeology. I think it's Archaeology, like the new expedition or something like that. It's the latest version of Archaeology. And don't worry, I do have some visuals today. I do have some games here, but they're higher up on the list. Archaeology is a game where, again, you are collecting sets of things, and it's you're turning them in, I believe, for money. It's been a little while since I played it, but it's one of those classic set collection mechanisms where if you have one of one card, it's only worth X amount of money, but if you wait until you gather 4 of them, it's worth more money. But in Archaeology, there's the risk that something bad can happen that can cause you to lose half the cards in your hand. So that timing, this is a great thing in set collection games, I think, that deciding if you are going to turn in your cards, if there's something in the game that pushes you to consider, do I keep on collecting or do I stop collecting? I think that is a great set collection mechanism to kind of push you with that timing choice of when exactly you're going to turn in the cards and score them or gain points for them or gain money for them. So that's Archaeology, my number 7 set collection game. Number 6 is Bunny Kingdom, that does actually 2 really cool set collection things. One is there are a bunch of cards in the game that are just kind of traditional set collection games mechanisms. Like if you have 3 of a certain type of treasure card, you get a mechanism. You get some points. You get 1 point per this thing that you're collecting, that type of thing. But it also has spatial set collection. That's essentially the game of Bunny Kingdom. It's spatial set collection. You're trying to score points for having a certain number of territories that are connected to each other that have unique resources. You're scoring for the unique resources within those little fiefs, I think they're called fiefs. And so I think that's really, really cool when you bring set collection into that spatial element of a game too. Other games that do this are Welcome to, Forbidden Desert, and Zooloretto. Those are kind of honorable mentions under this category of spatial set collection. I love Bunny Kingdom. Probably should have even been higher up on this list because I really do enjoy that game. That's my number 6, Bunny Kingdom. My number 5 is Sushi Go. Here's one that I actually do have. I actually have the original version of Sushi Go, and I have Sushi Go Party. This uses a lot of different set collection mechanisms. Let me see if I can pull out an example here. Nope, it's been a little finicky. Actually, no, here we go. Yeah, so here's a nice one. So tofu. If you have 1 tofu, you score 2 points. If you have 2 tofu, you score 6 points. But if you have 3 tofu, you get 0 points. I love that aspect of again, timing, kind of pushing your luck a little bit. And what this reminds me of one of the great things about set collection, I think from a design perspective, or an important thing to remember, beyond just timing that I mentioned earlier, is that there's a lot of player interaction in set collection. Like, it doesn't really work without player interaction. And if you do have player interaction, whether it's through like drafting in a game like Sushi Go or collecting from a card tableau like in Stone Age, the Card River, there's a lot of like built-in player interaction there. Especially, and so I think it's important in set collection to be able to see. Actually, this doesn't always apply. There's a game on my list that doesn't apply to this. But it often helps to be able to see what other opponents are collecting so that you can try to prevent them from collecting the thing they need, or at least decide the value of it. Is it worth it for you to take that thing from them and use it for yourself, or gain something else that's worth more for you? So I think there's some really nice built-in player interaction in set collection. That's Sushi Girl, my number 5. My number 4 is Sundae Split. Sundae Split is kind of like Sushi Go, but a little bit simpler, but with I Cut You Choose, which I really, really love. I love I Cut You Choose. And so in Sundae Split, some of the mechanisms are like if you pair whipped cream with sprinkles. If you have a whipped cream card and a sprinkles card, together they're worth 5 points. Separately, they're not worth any points. There's a mechanism where like you score points. I think this is the cherries. For the cherries, you score points for the most of a type of ice cream that you have there. There's majority. We haven't talked about that yet, but in set collection there could be majority. Like if you have the most of something or the least of something, you might gain or lose points. Sundae Split does that as well. But Sundae Split is a wonderful I cut you choose game, and I love that. Like I was just talking about, it has that element of player interaction that comes from what you're choosing, what you're cutting. And it also has face-up cards. So you are seeing what other players are gathering, and you're making decisions based on that evolve over the course of the game in terms of the set collection, which I think is really great and fun and important for set collection games. That's that's Sundae Split, my number 4. My number 3 is Seven Wonders. I don't own Seven Wonders, but I own Seven Wonders Duel, and it has a lot of the same set collection. This is one that I thought was borderline, but then I thought more about it, and I think this is really a set collection game because the things that you're gathering in Seven Wonders, not even just like the traditional set collection of the science cards, but the things like resources and the brown and the gray resources, you are collecting them, but you're never actually getting rid of those cards, nor are they providing you income. You are collecting these sets, and then you are using them over the course of the game. And so I think set collection works really, really well in Seven Wonders because you're not just gathering these sets of things, you are using them. They have utility throughout the game, not just at the end of the game, like the science cards in original Seven Wonders. So Seven Wonders is my number 3. I think it does a lot of great set collection things. My number 2 is Fantasy Realms. This is a really unique set collection game because there's so many different every card in this game is asking for sets. It's asking for, like, the king wants to be with the queen. There are cards that give you negative points if they're with another certain type of card, or they're worth more points if you have a certain type of card. There are cards that want like even number cards in your hand. There are cards that want all of the same suit or none of the same suit, things like that. Like every card in here has a different set collection rule built into it that often specifies a specific card that you need to like be on the lookout for. I love Fantasy Realms. It's one of my favorite filler games. Might be my favorite filler game, and I think it does set collection in such a great, unique way throughout the game. And every card is just a little mini set collection game. So that's Fantasy Realms, my number 2. Could have been my number 1 because I love that game, but I decided to give my number 1 to Ra, which is also one of my favorite auction games. In Ra, you are collecting sets in a couple of different interesting ways. There are some sets that you're collecting of buildings that score at the end of the game, whether you have a bunch of the same building or a bunch of different buildings. There's also these Nile tiles that you're collecting, where they only score every round if you have a flood tile. So only if the Nile River floods do you actually get to score those tiles. So you're collecting all these tiles, and you don't need more than one of the flood tiles. You really just need one. Then there's another set that's like, if you have the most, you can compare yourself to other players every round if you have the most of something, the least of something. So it has, again, all these little set collection mini games throughout the game of Ra that I find very satisfying. And again, they're public, so you get to see what other players are gathering. You get to see what tiles they're gathering, and then make decisions in the auction based on those sets that you and other players are gathering. That's why Ra is my number 1 favorite set collection game on this list. I think this list is kind of a mixed bag because I really enjoy a lot of these games. I was kind of surprised because sometimes I think as a designer I have looked at set collection as kind of a throwaway mechanism. Like, oh, I've got nothing else going on here. I'll make it a set thing, have you collect something. But now that I'm looking over this list, I'm like, I really actually enjoy this mechanism. It's very simple to teach and understand. It's very satisfying when you gather those big sets. It's satisfying when you turn in a set at the right time. And the spatial sets that I mentioned is very satisfying to put together those spatial areas in Bunny Kingdom, Forbidden Desert, when you discover where the hidden treasures are, or the components that you need to build your airplane. Welcome to, very satisfying. So all these little moments of satisfaction in these set collection games that make me really enjoy them. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, obviously. If you have a different definition of set collection, I'm totally fine with that. Feel free to define it in the comments. Or if you just want to mention like your top 3 favorite set collection games, I'd love to hear about that as well. There are definitely some that I didn't mention on this list that I enjoy, that were recommended to me when I talked about this on my Facebook Live video the other day that didn't quite make the list, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And yeah, I'd love to try some of your favorite set collection games too. All right, thanks for joining me. Have a good week.